Once that happened, I was in the middle of my now long-term love affair with Mothership.
Hell yeah.
So I've been playing some of these like indie games with some friends. Someone was like, hey, I want to run this game called Mothership. I'd never heard of it. I played it once and I was like, this is the best game I've ever played. It was the single best session I had ever played. It was like to die for, amazing. I just fell head over heels in love with it.
Regular listeners and floorheads know I love the RPG Mothership by Tuesday Night Games. Today I sit down with Ian Yusem, who's responsible for popular scenarios for Mothership like The Drain. Ian has a Kickstarter live for a huge anthology of Mothership scenarios and content called Hull Breach. The link is in the show notes, so check it out. I was fascinated by Ian's approach to making content and for playing Mothership. Stick around for an interesting conversation at the end around the toll of running a Kickstarter. This and every episode of Tabletop Talk is made possible by the patrons of Third Floor Wars. A shout out to a few of our newest patrons: Jacob, Isaac Turton, 8S, Eli Greason, Kevin Rademacher, Philip Cummings, and Jonathan Kennedy. Because of them and the 100+ other patrons, we bring you quality weekly tabletop content. Okay, sit back, relax, and enjoy my time with Ian.
Do you love to unplug and play games around the table? Greetings, friends and floorheads, to Tabletop Talk from Third Floor Wars. If you love tabletop gaming, you are in the right place. Listen as Craig delivers in-depth discussions and interviews with game designers, creators, insiders, and experts. Learn from the people making and playing the role-playing, miniature, and board games you love. Now, enjoy the show.
Howdy friends, Craig here. My guest today is Ian Yusem. Ian is a tabletop RPG designer, publishing under the label Anodyne Printware. He primarily writes sci-fi horror content for one of my favorite games, the Mothership RPG from Tuesday Night Games. Now, he's best known for his adventures The Drain, which crowdfunded on Kickstarter back in February of 21, and Moonbase Blues. Ian shares RPG publishing tutorials and project postmortems on his blog, The Uncanny Spheres. We'll have a link to all of that in the show notes. But Ian, welcome to the Third Floor.
Thank you for having me.
All right, my friend. So at one point, you knew nothing about rolling dice, looking at a piece of paper and pretending to be a spaceman out there fighting aliens. And then all of a sudden you discover tabletop role playing. So I'd be curious if we can go back there, and I'd love to know like the first time you were exposed to it.
The very first time I was maybe 11 years old.
Oh, wow.
And it was, I want to say 5 a.m. at an up all night sleepover at a friend's house.
Nice.
And my friend broke out either the second or third edition D&D box set with some minis. And I had never heard of D&D before. He did not explain the rules at all, but I remember I was really into Lord of the Rings. So, and I liked Legolas best of all. And so I made an elf. And early on, I distinctly remember feeling frustrated by the mechanics that was like, wait, I can't be good at both swords and bows.
Yeah.
And he plonked down a big dragon mini on the dungeon. And I said, I want to fight that. And he was like, no, you have to go through the dungeon first. And I can't remember exactly what happened, but I'm 90% sure we played for like maybe 15 minutes. And by the end of it, my character was destroyed by the dragon almost immediately.
He ramped it up quick on you.
Yeah. Well, you got to go out with a bang.
Well, I love the fact that, with second or third edition, if a kid popped out the minis, I'd be like, that must have been the rich kid in the neighborhood, right? They already have all the minis and everything.
Maybe. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. It was very fun looking at all the little skeletons and
I'm
dudes.
sure. So what stuck with you? So that was your first experience. Did you say, you know what, that was fine, whatever, or did it stick in your brain?
So I did not play another role-playing game for another 10 years.
Wow. Okay.
So, I mean, it was a very liminal, weird experience that I had, in one strange morning at another person's house. I think it must have stuck in my brain because when I rediscovered role-playing games, I was just I was at a point in my life where there wasn't a lot going on. I was looking for something to do. I was like, oh yeah, role-playing games exist. So I looked into some. I discovered Critical Role videos on YouTube.
Oh yeah.
Watched a few. Thought, okay, this seems pretty cool. I played some really, looking back, not very good public online games on Roll20 that I joined via their Looking for Game forums. But it was, despite the games being kind of a mess of, flaky no-shows and like really weird homebrews and stuff, it was compelling enough that I stuck with it and managed to branch out a couple years later into the indie scene.
So what caused you to make that jump, Ian? So, you're pretty mainstream at this point, Critical Role, you sticking with D&D, and not mainstream in a derogatory way, right?
Right.
So at some point you got a smell or you got a scent on something, and what made you turn your head a little?
I had to first decide I didn't really like D&D 5th edition. We had played through 2 years with one group of the entire Rise of Tiamat campaign.
Holy cow. Okay.
And by the end of it, I was like, that was kind of a shitty adventure. I didn't like it.
Because?
It was just so brutally like combat after combat after combat, and not a lot of very interesting things happened. And I just realized I wasn't really having fun with it, but I knew that there was something about the hobby that I liked.
Right.
So I looked around. I found someone raving about Troika on Reddit, which is a really cool indie game. And that was my next game.
No kidding. Boy, that's a huge jump, Ian. Wow.
Yeah.
So what was it like getting your hands on that? I mean, like, were you like, holy shit? Or
yeah, it totally set my mind on fire.
Yeah.
I was like, this RPGs can do this?
Right.
Yeah, I just played a ton of games. I played some story games. I played some OSR kind of games. I played Maze Rats, Black Hack, Macchiato Monsters.
Very nice.
Troika, and a few others. Plus, I played a marathon of games at the Gauntlet Con, the online sort of convention. That was several years ago now, but I got a pretty good exposure to a bunch of games. And at the end of it, I was like, yep, Troika is still the best one of these.
That's cool. That's cool.
So I stuck with that.
So that's been a couple years, right, since you really started exploring the indie scene. Looking back on it now with a ton more experience than when you first came across Troika, what do you think hooked you so hard about Troika? That in your words, set your mind on fire?
I think the writing, just the straight up, this writing is amazingly creative and interesting. The art. So this was not the current edition of Troika. This was the original art, the original edition, which didn't have a ton of art in it, but what was there was weird.
Yeah.
And the mechanics were just like utterly bizarre. Like the you're drawing tokens out of a bag. And it was clearly just having fun.
Right.
And, you know, that sort of creativity is still the thing that I most look for in RPGs.
So having kind of walked away from D&D, not out of, you know, well, maybe out of disappointment, I don't know, but, you know, going in and discovering all of these other games, and the games you listed off are mechanically very interesting, right? Settings wise, very interesting, and a huge variance. Is there anything when you look back at D&D that you miss, that you still appreciate, or you're just like, you know what, I did my time and I'm not going back, or have no nostalgia?
Every once in a while, I get it in my head, like creating this concept for a character and building it out like in this very crunchy, video gamey sort of mechanically fulfilling way seems appealing. And in the last, you know, 2 to 3 years since I've discovered indie RPGs, I've gone back a couple times and not had a good time. So
the promise is not met. Yeah.
Yeah. I think like I like video games, you know, like I like video game RPGs, and I think D&D sells these archetypes and the promise of these characters very well.
Yep.
But playing it, I don't have the best experience with.
Yeah, I mean, it's a game where I think you can find a lot of joy away from the table, right? Thinking about, you know, what happens when I level up? Am I going to go this way? Am I going to go that way? And then there's times you go back to that grind, right? Where you just like roll for initiative. Yeah. Roll D20, huge variance. Okay. I missed, you know. So I can definitely understand that. So guys, the Insider Insight series is my opportunity to sit down with designers, developers, artists, writers, and creators and learn how they approach their work. I try to understand their process, inspiration, and methods for crafting their creations. And that's what we're going to do with Ian today. So we're going to take a quick break. And when we get back from that break, we're going to talk about a little game, which isn't so little anymore. We're going to talk about Mothership. We'll be right back. Right now is the part of many podcasts where someone comes on, interrupts the show, and explains that you should consider paying for the content you're already getting for free. They'll go on and explain that by giving $1 or more a month, you not only support the show, but you allow the show to grow and improve. Here on the third floor, we commit to not interrupting your episode of Tabletop Talk with such a plea. We pledge not to run a spot asking you to go to patreon.com and give $1 or more a month. Even if there's a link in this show's description, and there is, we won't ask you to click it and become a patron. We won't spend time yammering about the benefits like early access to episodes, getting those episodes without ad breaks, or even getting a chance to play in one of Craig's RPG sessions. Anyway, enjoy this episode. We needed to clarify that we wouldn't do this type of solicitation. So Ian, it's neat to hear kind of the as you leveled up, right? As somebody who's consuming RPGs. And I thought it was interesting, you know, you're talking about the path Tiamat and your critique of it is it was boring, right? And now, of course, the reason you're here on the show is that you write, you know, modules, you write adventures. And I think that that's interesting. But let's go back a little bit. And there's always a very interesting transition from more, I'm not home brewing, I'm not creating my own, you know, home world and things like that. Like I want to create something from scratch. When did that itch first come to you and where did it come from?
I think it just came from running games. You know, I started playing some of these indie games, but then I really wanted to run them. And, you know, running games is, you know, half a step removed from writing games.
Yeah. It's still design, right? Yeah.
Right. So I found Mothership. I was playing Mothership, and then I started blogging a little bit about Mothership. I had, you know, some friends who were into the like old G+ blog sort of scene. So I was like, I don't know, maybe I can do some of that. I had been playing a lot of Mothership, and I was running games. I was running, one shots here and there with friends. I had exposed my family to a game or two of Mothership, but then I was also running regular games, and I was running some of the first-party Mothership material, but I was also making up some of my own stuff. And one of the scenarios that I came up with, I took a concept from a friend, Die Sugars, who is a designer, but they happened to mention this idea for what if there was a meteor circling a moon and the light was turning everyone crazy. So they just casually mentioned that in some server, some Discord server, and I ran with it. I used that as the base for like a very lightly sketched out scenario that I ran for some friends. I thought it went pretty well. It was kind of cool. So I threw up my roughly polished up version of my notes on the blog, shared that on the main Mothership Discord, and that was that. And then a couple months later, out of the blue, this guy I'd never spoken to, named Warren Denning, reached out to me and was like, hey, I read your blog. I thought it was pretty cool. I fully laid out your adventure.
Wow.
And I want to know what you think. So he had done a single page layout. I mean, this is a simple, small scenario, but it was really cool.
Yeah.
I mean, and nothing like that had ever happened to me before. I don't even think I had a single comment on my blog,
That's cool, man. That's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So that stunned me. And then, he was like, oh, I kind of want to like put this out, just throw it up for free. Is that cool with you? And I was like, yeah, that'd be cool. Or we could work together and like expand it and make something like, publishable with this. So we worked on it, and it went from a single page to a double-sided single page pamphlet. And it was one of the first published third-party scenarios for Mothership.
And what was it called?
Moonbase Blues.
That's cool, man. That's cool.
Yeah. So that was the first thing I ever published.
Isn't it neat? It's amazing when you just create something and then you find someone else that latches onto it, right? Like that. I mean, and then to have a boomerang back to you, and it's just like, holy shit, like that's a neat feeling, man.
Yeah, it felt really good. And we published it, and it sold like, I want to say like 300 or 400 PDF copies within like a month.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
And yeah, it was like, well, that felt pretty good. I'm going to do more of that.
So going backwards a little bit though, was Mothership just the game that was there when you were ready to start flexing a little bit here? Or was there something about Mothership that you think inspired you to kind of do the blog and kind of next step? Or could have just been any game and it was just timing?
I think I was once that happened, I was in the middle of my now long-term love affair with Mothership.
Hell yeah.
So I'd been playing some of these like indie games with some friends. Someone was like, hey, I want to run this game called Mothership. I'd never heard of it. I played it once and I was like, this is the best game I've ever played. It was the single best session I had ever played. It was like to die for, amazing. I just fell head over heels in love with it.
So after all that exposure to all those other games, Ian, I mean, there's something very, old school about Mothership. What was it that just put its hooks into you like that? Holy cow.
The sci-fi horror genre was not something I'd ever explored in RPGs. And the atmosphere of playing that and the way that Mothership sort of hooks into the tension and the, particular horror of space, it just sold me so hard.
That's cool.
I remember distinctly that it was some scenario that my friend who was running the game came up with. There was a weird geometric anomaly that was chasing us around a derelict space station. And I played a scientist, and I think that may have been one of the first times I played a character that was just out for destruction. Like my eyes lit up. I was like, I'm going to take these grenades and I'm going to get us all killed, and it's going to be great. It was just, I don't know, like it was a mix of the lightness of the system that sort of just let the inherent horror of space shine through with the particular cassette futurist aesthetic.
Yeah, good way to put it.
I had tried reading Stars Without Number and kind of bounced off of it. Like the particular flavor of sci-fi just didn't speak to me, but Mothership really did. And I had such a good time playing it then that I just started running it.
So I had an interesting thing happen to me with Mothership, and I'd be curious what your thoughts are if you experienced anything close to it. So I can't remember how I came across it, right? And it was pay what you want. I think I threw $10 at him or $12 at him. I can't remember. And download, I'm like, you know what? This as a guy who used to play Redbox and stuff like that, I'm like, there's a lot of things that are familiar here, right? To like second edition Cthulhu and stuff like that. And I ran it, and I had the same experience, which is suddenly the mechanics kind of blended, but held up, right? So they were there, but they helped enhance the experience, and then the simplicity of the character creation and everything. So I had a ton of fun with it. Was also a big fan, and then Free League's Alien came out. And I kept hearing about it. And I went and checked it out and kind of put Mothership to the side because I'd had it in my head that Mothership was because Alien didn't exist, right? So I can explore that type of a game. And then when I came across Alien, I was afraid that all you could do is tell the one story with that game. And it turned out you couldn't. Free League did a very good job of making that a very wide open thing. And I just happened to come back, just like picked up my Mothership again. I just remember like, no, these are two different games. Like they're both can exist and both have that. Has that happened to you at all? Or have you explored Alien from Free League at all?
I played Alien once. We played, I'm not sure what the name of the scenario is, but I think it was maybe the starter scenario. My experience was like, I'd never played a Free League game before, so their sort of dice pool thing was new to me. I thought that I liked the stress system. I thought that, I liked that it was sort of a push your luck, some advantages, some disadvantages thing. My experience was that I had sort of the quintessential Alien thing. We fought the alien.
Right.
And that was enough for me. I don't know. Like I was like, that was pretty cool, but I don't know. Like the alien is the alien.
Yeah.
I knew what it was. And, I don't know what the hell is in any given Mothership scenario, what kind of nightmare someone cooked up. So, I mean, my impression was that it did what it could do, and then I didn't really look into it further. I'm not necessarily, you're saying that it does a good job of having an open universe, but I never probed deep enough to really find that stuff.
Right. So I think you could, with Alien, you can definitely do, the Marine story, right?
Right.
Without ever coming across a xenomorph, or you can really do a space trucker type story. What I think is very unique about Mothership, though, is that like it could be effing anything. Like whatever I can dream up, it doesn't have to be an alien. Right. It could be, and I think that's something that's pretty unique about the premise behind Mothership. So it's good that you had a chance to do it. And that's my big confession when it comes to Mothership, is that I cheated on it and then came back and fell in love again. So, guys, we're going to take another break. When I get back from this break, I want to talk to Ian a little bit more about his first kind of big drop out there. It's a scenario that's talked about all the time. It's always part of the conversation. We're going to talk about The Drain as well as Meat Grinder. We'll be right back. Howdy friends, Craig here. You deserve a new playmat. Here on the third floor, we use Mats by Mars. They are scratch resistant, waterproof, wet erase marker compatible, almost free of glare, and lighter than neoprene. Mats by Mars gives you over 40 designs to choose from. You pick a mat, pick a design, and then you pick an overlay, like one for Marvel Crisis Protocol, Star Wars Legion, or even Malifaux 3rd Edition. Those overlays will really speed up your deployment and make the placement of objective markers so easy. Use our promotion code in the show notes to get a 10% discount on your first order. In the notes of your order, you can even request the third floor logo on your mat for free. That makes the best mat in the business even a little better. So get some new mats, save yourself some money, and help support the show. Go to matsbymars.com. All the details are in the show notes, including the discount code. So Moonbase Blues comes out. Several hundred people buy the PDF from you. Again, another surprise, right? It's like you had your buddy there come back and say, hey, I took your words and made them pretty, and you did more with that. Then to find out that there's, people consuming it, right? And it's amazing when you see people consume your stuff. Like every time I look at downloads or views on my crap, I'm like those are people. Every one of those is a person. Where do you go from there? You said this was fun. I liked this. Was the drain next?
There were a couple little things in between Moonbase Blues and the drain.
Okay.
I made, this is almost more of like it could have been a blog post, but me and another third-party Mothership designer, his handle is Carrick on Discord. He published Bloom, which is a third-party scenario. We wrote a D100 list of like creepy items that tell these little environmental horror stories. That's called From Nightmares. I published Dinoplex Cataclysm, which is another pamphlet scenario that's basically Jurassic Park in space.
It's very clever, Ian. I enjoyed that one.
Thank you. So there was a couple little things that I was dabbling in, but then I really got a kick out of Zine Quest 2, which is this event that Kickstarter puts on every year, or has for the last several years, in February, where people are funding these cool zines. And so once Zine Quest 3 was rolling around, I wanted to get involved in that. So I had this idea cooking for a little bit to do a Dungeon Crawl Classics style level 0 funnel in Mothership. And so I worked on that towards the end of 2020. It started taking shape, and I ran a Kickstarter for it, and it went pretty well.
So let's take a step back, Ian. So
Sure.
For those that are not familiar with the funnel that for DCC, so Dungeon Crawl Classics has a concept of a level 0, and basically each player takes anywhere from 2 to 5 peasants, right? They have no class, no distinctions or anything. This is a very old school D&D style game. And right. you throw them literally into a dungeon, each person controlling multiple ones, and then the character that survives is the one that you then take to level 1 and then becomes your character as it go forward. So that piques your interest, Ian. And how does that relate then for you to Mothership, right? So you said, I want to do something like that. What is something like that?
I had to grapple with that. So I was interested in exploring war as horror in Mothership. What is war like in Mothership? And then I thought of the funnel. That is, it's very meat grindery. Some sort of ideas started loosely forming in my head. What if it was like World War I? What if there were trenches? What if you were cannon fodder? So I sort of had to combine all these ideas in my head into something that made sense. So what I landed on was funnel characters might be something else, but in this specific instance, They are prisoners who have been conscripted to be meat fodder in this giant space battle. And they're sort of in a high-tech chain gang where they're wearing these explosive collars around their neck. And if you get too far away from each other, your head explodes. And that was to sort of solve the problem of, well, why would a bunch of prisoners work together? You're forced to.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it just, for me, writing is kind of like this ever evolving thing of having an idea and then working on it to have it make sense in some sort of playable way. And so the Drain formed out of that.
So let's talk about that process a little bit, Ian. So you get some concepts, some ideas, right? We've got the inspiration from the DCC stuff. Do you just sit in your room and just iterate and then sleep on it and then think about 10 other things and then come back to it later? Do you have somebody you bounce off of? Like how does the ball roll down the hill?
For me, it's first it starts with some ideas, then getting it polished up to something that makes a little bit of sense. Basically, I try to make the minimum runnable concept, and then I run it as soon as I possibly can. So for me, writing is all about playtesting. So I ran it, and it worked really well. And so instantly I knew, okay, this works. I'm going to do this. So, I ran, I think 3 or 4 play tests over the course of writing. So I would furiously write down everything that I learned in the last, 3 or 4 hours, apply those notes, ruminate, take it back to the table. And then it sort of shapes up into something more and more closer to the final project from there.
So if I were to go grab my copy of The Drain off my shelf right now and then break into your home when you were sleeping and steal the first version of The Drain, I want to know first, what would I see as the same, right? So if I looked at your scratch notes that led to the first play test, what made it all the way to the version I have?
Gosh, it's kind of hard to think. I have to think back several drafts. Well,
that can be a concept, right?
Yeah, I mean, the World War I as a defining aesthetic was there from the start. The first location in The Drain are literally trenches. And that was how I had it set up from the get-go. And that was like the first sort of mini scenario that I ran to know that would work. The idea of when I originally thought of this idea, this is going to sound really stupid, but this all started with someone making a joke on a Discord server. What if you ran a funnel in a funnel?
What the hell does that mean? That's
right.
Interesting.
It doesn't really mean anything, but I was like, okay, what does that mean? So the idea of this, so the Drain takes place in this rotating cylindrical habitat. So it's spinning to create artificial gravity. And it's this big sort of like farmland. It's like a long-term habitation for these people. It's sort of, you might call it like a colony ship or something. But instead of being a cylinder, it's a cone. So it's a funnel and a funnel.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So now that we have it, like, so it sounds like some of the basic themes and premises made it all the way through.
Right.
Can you remember an iteration where you had some ideas and you're like, I am so excited, and you put it to the table and you're like, I am throwing that out. It was terrible. So what are some things that you cut and needed to be cut?
The explosive collar thing was originally an actual chain gang. It was originally characters were physically chained together, and the group that I ran it for hated it. They just felt too limited. They were really like constantly like their imagination was constantly being sort of like stopped short.
Right.
Because, but like my characters are in this like predefined line and I have to interact in this sort of weird way. So that needed to get revised, but I still wanted to carry some elements with that, because one of the things that I dislike in games is that awkward moment of trying to figure out why we're working together, why we're doing this. So the explosive collar evolved from there, and I think it works pretty well.
So was this your first time running a Kickstarter?
Yes.
All right. So I need to understand what that process was like for you, getting your arms around it, understanding it. What type of research did you do? And probably big lessons learned.
So I looked a lot at other Kickstarters. I talked to people who I knew who had run Kickstarters. Sean McCoy, who created Mothership, was kind enough to help me out, figure out a lot of the sort of financial business ins and outs. Also, Kristen and Matt Kelly from Exalted Funeral, they did fulfillment for me, and they were also really encouraging and helpful along the way. I tried to be really prepared. I got started on it really early. It was already basically done by the time the Kickstarter launched, the actual zine. I spent a really long time on the page. I tried to, where I couldn't figure something out myself, I just sort of copied what Mothership did. I looked at their campaigns. We have these pretty, graphic headers that show off or break up sections of the campaign. Mock-ups are good. People like videos. So we did this really ridiculously ambitious video where I had my friend Meredith make physical models of spaceships and record them. And, it was a live action Kickstarter video. It was like ridiculously complicated and like way overkill for this like zine, but we did it. We did it, and some people liked it. I mean, I think that it was so weird. It was like a shock to the system that it got people prepared for what was going to follow in the campaign. In terms of lessons learned, even with all my preparation, I was not prepared for the physical and emotional strain of running the Kickstarter.
How so?
Just the day-to-day intensity of not just all the things you have to do, all the fires you have to put out, but just the stress of watching those numbers tick up, watching, Kickstarter gives you a little running tally of all the activity in your campaign. So you can see whenever someone drops, there's a big red block. It's like you did something wrong. I don't know. Someone doesn't like you anymore. And just, I don't know, once that number is ticking, your entire, self-worth is like wrapped up in how this thing is doing. Even if your campaign exceeds your wildest imaginations, which mine did, I think it did like 3 times better than like my highest prediction I was willing to let myself believe in. So it doesn't even feel enough because it could be better. I don't know. The goalposts endlessly shift so that nothing feels satisfying. So, personally, I was energized during the campaign. It felt really great. And then immediately after it ended, I was like down in the dumps, exhausted, and needed to recover for like weeks.
So I'd be curious, Ian, and before I ask this question, I meant to tell you at the very beginning, if at any point I ask a question that you don't want to answer, just say, Craig, I'm not going to answer that. I'll ask another question. This might be one I don't know. I don't know you well enough. So this experience you went through, how much of that is how Kickstarter does what it does, and how much of it is you as a person? Or is it both?
I think it's both.
Yeah.
I think that, I definitely have anxiety, and this sort of thing is really sets that off.
Yeah.
But I think that Kickstarter is just more work than you're ever prepared for. I mean, it's running a business, and it's like opening 3 different businesses at the same time. You're doing the RPG work. You're also creating, managing, and promoting a storefront.
Yeah. And
you're opening up a line of customer service. You're on the hook to your backers, 24/7. Even after the campaign ends, it goes on for a long time.
Yep.
And
you got the comments. That's brutal.
Yeah. Thankfully, my campaign went pretty well. I think I didn't run into any major, controversies or.
Yeah, but even if it's all positive, it still has a toll, right?
Right.
I mean, you feel like you need to answer everyone. You need to make sure you read everyone. And what does this mean? Or does that what that means? And like, I read 10 comments and they're all like 5-star, 5 stars. And one says 4.5 stars. Why is that 4.5 star? Right.
Right. So it's not something you can, or it can be if you take a really reserved, laid back approach to it. I think it can be something you do that doesn't dominate your life.
Mm-hmm.
But I took an approach that was very all in, very involved, and it dominated my life.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. Of course, I've never run a Kickstarter. I've funded a few, but I've never run one. But everything you just said totally resonates with me. And and I've had to like take a step back mentally and I've like actually talked to my therapist about it, like my download numbers, right? My views on YouTube and stuff like that. There's something that's gamified there, right? That like itches the back of my brain and I get, wicked into it. Like, oh, it's a chart. I can chart it now, and
right.
So I don't know if I'm built to do it, to run a Kickstarter, man, based off of what you just said, because I think it could feed the same thing for me.
It's tough. I mean, I compulsively check all of my, sales numbers on all my pages like multiple times a day.
Yeah.
I'm on DriveThruRPG, I'm on itch.io. It's like, I don't know, it's probably not healthy to do that, but I don't know how to stop.
Sure.
There's just so many metrics to keep track of. I'm not, it feels like, you might, if you let it lie, you might miss something. You might miss a surge of activity, and then if you can figure out where that came from, you can like learn something about, this book was really popular in Russia. I don't know what to do with that information, but now I know.
Yeah, but it's data, right? And data is interesting, and it kind of gets your mind spinning a little bit, and like none of it has to do with money for me, right?
Right.
Like it's like, that's interesting. What does that mean? I can totally get sucked into that. Yeah. So when you get the drain out there, it's funded beyond what you expected. It was a bigger hit than you expected. You said 3 times what your highest expectation was.
Yep.
How many backers did you have? Do you remember ballpark?
1,400.
That's amazing, dude.
Yeah.
What was it like once it was out there? So was there anything that you heard or saw that surprised you once it was unleashed and, thousands of people started playing it at different tables?
I would say the most notable thing was the lack of feedback.
Interesting.
I've had this experience where I very often, or almost every time I release something, it sells well. People, eventually tell me they like it, but there's a long tail on people playing your game, leaving a review, saying anything about it. So it can feel like crickets. It can feel disheartening to release it. And then it's like nothing, so it's not literally nothing, but in this case, someone will say, oh, it looks nice.
Yep.
It's like, yeah, but how did it play? And
I've owned it for a while and I've never run the drain, man. So I know exactly what you're saying.
Yeah. So it's, eventually, I, every once in a while, I'll check the, after action report channel in the Mothership Discord, and someone will play the drain or play, something, and it's amazing to read about and it's awesome. But that I think it's not, I don't think there's anything bad about my adventures that people don't play them. I just think that it's the nature of RPGs is, not everything makes it to the table. And if it does, it might be months or years. So it's just this weird thing. And then about the specific feedback, it's been mostly really positive. I mean, people say that hey, actually funnel works pretty well in Mothership. And I actually had someone reach out to me and said, I never really realized that funnels couldn't just be a DCC thing. So I went and made a funnel in another system.
Nice.
And I, after I released the drain, I think as part of I did this as a stretch goal, but I released to backers a separate mechanics sheet of just, here's a funnel, with permissions for people to use it, in their own stuff. So, unfortunately, I haven't heard of anyone making a funnel, until Hull Breach.
Very, very cool.
I don't know. Yeah, it's just a long tail. It's like you get rewarded in the extreme long term.
Yeah.
But the initial feedback is very quiet.
Well, the reality is, and this is true of a couple of geek hobbies, is playing these games and buying and reading them are two different hobbies. Mm-hmm. Right. And I enjoy both of them. I own far more games than I have ever run and will ever run, but I enjoy buying them and I enjoy reading them and taking them in. So we made a nice little transition there. So let's take a quick break. And I want to talk about this Hull Breach, which was the reason we got Ian on the show. We'll be right back.
There are so many online retailers. It can be hard to find one that is trustworthy, has great prices, along with some reliable customer service. On the third floor, we love ordering our gaming goodies from Gadzooks Gaming. Their selection of terrain, miniatures, dice, custom decor, and conversion bits are curated for gamers by gamers. You'll find they have what you need and what you didn't know you needed to take your gaming fun to the next level. If you mention Third Floor Wars in the cart notes of your order, you'll also get a free gift. And you'll help support the podcast. Check out gadzooksgaming.com and mention Third Floor Wars on checkout to get that free gift.
Obviously, Kickstarter didn't punch you hard enough in the face. You have now decided that you want to hop back in the ring and do another Kickstarter. Before we start talking about Hull Breach, when did that transition for you? Where the memory of childbirth before was faded away enough that you felt like you could do it again?
I think it was pretty much immediate.
Oh, wow.
You not that I wanted to do it as much as I knew that I could. You learn so much doing a Kickstarter. You're having to figure out a million different things every day. And now running this one, even though it was for, just a zine, that's not a super complicated, pledge tier system or anything. I knew that I could do it again. And running that Kickstarter and having it go successfully really got me thinking seriously about doing this as a viable career option.
Yeah.
And particularly having the stats in hand of how Kickstarter works, how much traffic is driven by Kickstarter itself and not externally. It really felt like there's kind of no other way.
Yeah.
So it's just sort of a fact of life at this point. And the question was just, what's the next thing I'm going to do? Some of my other projects, like we talked about, Moonbase Blues, just sort of happened and snowballed into this thing. Hull Breach started out as just an idea on a Discord server. I had started a small community for third-party Mothership publishers to sort of talk shop and swap tips. And during ZineQuest, a few of us collaborated to cross-promote each other's stuff and, boost our promotional efforts and stuff. And that went pretty well. I think Mothership zines ended up being like 5 of the top 10 most backed projects during ZineQuest 3.
That's amazing.
And so I wanted to do more stuff with that community. This is a whole another thing that we could get into, but earlier in 2020, I had participated in this really amazing charity project called Dissident Whispers, which was a anthology of one-page adventures that was put out to raise money for the National Bail Fund Network, and TKG got involved and published it and made that happen. And that was like a really life-changing experience. And it was magical to see that come together. To be a part of that, it was like 10 days of the most intense work I have ever participated in. And at the end of it, we had a book and it raised, $60,000 for charity within like a month or something.
That's cool.
And during that project, I took kind of a leadership role. I helped coordinate things between TKG and the group, and I helped, put people in contact and figure out how we were going to, move things along in different stages. And I helped coordinate communications between all the writers and all the editors and the project organizers and stuff. So it was like a really intensive learning experience, kind of like a Kickstarter.
Yeah.
And so that's another thing that I now had in my pocket that's like, oh, this kind of really big group project, there were 100 people involved. I've done that. That's something I can do. So going back to what we were originally talking about in this Discord server for third-party Mothership creators, we'd been talking about doing some sort of group project, and I floated the idea of doing something like Dissonant Whispers, where we would do an anthology that everyone could contribute to. And as the idea developed, I kind of took it on as a publishing project for myself, as just the most feasible way to make this happen.
Yep. And
initially it was like, oh, it'll be like a 60-page zine. Oh, it'll be like a 80-page Perfect Bound book. Okay, 100-page, 120-page, 160-page. Oh, it's a hardcover now. Oh, there's like, we have a design team of 3 people and we have 5 artists and we have 20 authors, and it sort of snowballed into this whole crazy thing.
So we kind of jumped over the headline a little bit.
Yeah.
So for those listening, this is being recorded before Hull Breach, the campaign starts, but we're releasing it in conjunction with the campaign. When people follow the link below to Hull Breach, what are they going to see? So
they're going to see a really cool render of a hardcover book called Hull Breach, which is an anthology collection of all sorts of cool toys and adventures and articles and individual monsters and equipment collections and all sorts of crazy things that you can grab and plug into your Mothership campaign. It is sort of like a loose toy box of stuff that you can pick out and plug in, but it's also got some interconnectivity that there's almost like a secret mega campaign sort of in there tying it all together.
Yeah.
It is the product of around 30 contributors. All of the writers have either previously published something for Mothership or participated in Dissonant Whispers, or like an active Mothership blogger. So it started out as this sort of community project, and we tried to keep that concept, through to the end. And
how has that impacted you as a designer, though, right? So you're really very much in production mode here and project management mode here, but you're being exposed to the creativity of so many different people and reading their material, and they're pitching you and they're sending you things. What impact has that had on you? How has that changed you as far as how you think about game design?
Made me have, I think, so my role on the project is both as a publisher, but I also am the developmental editor on every article.
Wow. Okay.
So we've started working on this in April. So since then, I have been collaborating with all of the authors, helping them play test the material, giving them notes and feedback, and helping them develop their things to completion. So I was really, very hands-on with every single thing. Yeah, going to the book. So for me, it made me really crystallize what are the key elements that need to go into an adventure.
And they are?
They are a very clear orientation up front. What's going on? What are like the key elements? How do you run this thing?
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that, I made sure is going in every single adventure. Every single bit of usable material is telling you how to run this, because you're going to be flipping through this book. What am I going to run tonight? What cool little thing can I use? So even though you own the book, every article is pitching you on why you should use it.
Yep.
So that's really important. I really like fun tables and little toys and things that you can apply to other things.
Yep.
So I'm always thinking, in my early rounds of feedback, it's, some structural stuff. How can we make this work? But it's also like, what's something cool? What's another cool thing you could do? What's another little direction you could take it in? So there's a lot of that in it.
It's kind of like your From Nightmares idea, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. And that kind of stuff appears in a lot of my stuff, in Moonbase Blues, the first thing I published, there is a table of ways that the meteor mad enemies, which are basically like zombies who have been, gone crazy because of this infectious light, how they've incorporated the color blue physically and violently into their person. Nice. So every time you encounter a zombie, it could just be a generic zombie, but it's specific. There's a specific flavor to it. So that's something that I'm really passionate about. And I think I got that partially from the core Mothership rules, where one of the first things you do when you're starting up a character, it's not just, okay, what are these numbers, but you get a patch and a trinket. And that D100 patch table and that D100 trinket table is maybe the best thing about Mothership.
I could not agree more.
Right. So I want to include that in everything that I do. I want to relive that experience of just like poring over this cool table. So that's an element. And just generally something that I try to emphasize is, usability, playability, playability. How does this actually work? How can we make all these elements come together? I mean, it's just basic development stuff, but we really play tested the hell out of this thing,
So Ian, that's helpful that you're able to obviously share your knowledge and your experience with each of these developers and really give them these types of tips. But I guess what I also want to know is, when did it go the other way? When did somebody put something in front of you that made you go, oh shit, I'd never thought about it this way, or I've never, approached it this way, that made you rethink things a little bit?
So there's a lot of like weird eclectic material in the book, and there are a couple entire systems basically in their own right, like system hacks of Mothership. So one of them is by MV, who has published Mothership stuff before, but they made a hack of Mothership that you can play wardenless or GMless. And it's not really how I play games. You know, in my exploration of indie games, I've trended towards the more, you know, old school style of running games. But it's really cool. And like the sort of oracles, like the tools that prompts and ideas that they wrote to facilitate the style of play really grabbed me. And I think it's one of the cooler things in the book. And so, yeah, I don't know, that sold me.
So when an artist puts out an album, they always ask, you know, which song do you think is going to be the hit? So in your mind, with all of these out there, I mean, obviously you love them all, right? It wouldn't make it into the book. But is there one that you think people are going to talk about when they finally get the book in their hands? One that's going to create a stir?
Yes, I think the hit is called Vibe Chetty by Joel Hines.
Nice.
Who wrote The Desert Moon of Karth, which is another
phenomenal. Yeah,
another dope, amazing zine from Zine Quest 3. And he recently kickstarted another module, Abilities Considered Unnatural. So he wrote for us an adventure called Vibe Chetty, which, if you aren't familiar with Mothership, it's one of the weapons in the core book, which is just a vibrating machete.
It can't be sci-fi unless you have some blade that vibrates.
Yeah. So Vibe Chetty is a slasher horror scenario.
Oh, that's great.
So it is, it takes place on an abandoned, like arboretum station, like a playground for, you know, millionaires. And like any good slasher horror scenario, like any good slasher horror story, there is an origin of the killer. And there was this mysterious construction accident that killed all these workers, but one survived and still lurks on the station and lives only to hunt the scions, the children of the billionaires who, you know, skimped on safety measures and caused the accident, who, you know, go and delinquently party on this derelict station. And it's so fun.
Oh,
it's
that's
so
cool.
Fun.
That's very, very cool. All right. So obviously, people below can grab the links below for Hull Breach. I'm going to link to a lot of the other stuff that we've talked about, Ian, both your stuff and a few of the other call outs that you've put on there. But before we go, one thing I always like to ask my guests is, what are you really enjoying right now? And it could be an RPG, it could be a movie, it could be a video game, board game. Is there something that recently that has really, you know, set your brain on fire, to use your term, something that you really are enjoying right now?
God, the brutally honest answer is I'm too busy to enjoy anything. You know,
when was the last time you enjoyed yourself, Ian?
Gosh, it's been a bit. This Kickstarter is so complicated. And,
yeah. Well, you could have made it much more. Could have gone 40 people instead of 30 people.
Yeah. So, gosh.
What's the most recent fun you've had not playing Mothership?
Okay. I rewatched one of my favorite movies, which is Wizard People, Dear Reader.
Never heard of it. Talk
to me. Yeah. So it is a dubbed over track for the first Harry Potter movie. And
so you play it while watching the movie on mute.
You watch it on mute and you play this
God.
track, and it is the funniest thing I've ever experienced. And in a night of, you know, intense stress, that's what I turn to. And it's so funny. It's so
everybody
funny.
Listening wasn't listening with a pen in their hand, and now they've all grabbed their pen. So what's the name of it again?
Wizard people, comma, dear reader.
Okay, we'll link to it below. But I might be doing that tonight. That's very, very cool. Anything else you want to plug other than the Kickstarter, my friend?
I don't think so. But could I give a shout out?
Please.
Shout out to Meredith, who made us the best damn Kickstarter video I've ever seen. She's one of the designers on the project, and she is a magician who has all these crazy design talents, and she edited our video, which is really
You're
good.
really excited about it.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it.
Oh, that's cool. You know, I was going to totally let you go, and now I'm not going to because I completely forgot this. What do you think about the rules changes? What do you think about version 1 of Mothership?
Everything about it is like takes the good parts of Mothership and makes it more. I've played them. They're really good.
Yeah.
It's really good. There are some quirks of Zero E Mothership that I found charming over time. You know, one of the things that I kind of like about it is that unless you're facing a couple particularly really strong weapons, it's kind of hard to die from damage in Mothership. But that has an interesting effect that you're going to die from space.
Yep.
So you're going to die from environmental insta-kill hazards, or you'll have a heart attack from stress. But unless the enemy has a shotgun, you're probably not going to die from damage. And I kind of like that. Mm-hmm. You know, not in I think that's good design, but it's fun.
Right.
But the new rules for damage are both more lethal and more interesting because of the hit system, where you're not going to be killed outright. First, you're going to take some sort of horrible wound, and then you're sort of failing forward with now you have this thing to deal with. Now you're missing an arm. Now you have to stop the bleeding. So it sort of takes the let's make things more interesting stuff from the panic system and brings it into the damage system.
Yeah.
And that's really good.
And the new panic system, I think, solves one of the few criticisms I had. You know, the inevitable, if things go too long, you're going to have a heart attack, right? It just snowballs. And I really love how they did the new panic system. And Sean will be coming on the show, so for those of you listening, we'll dig into with Sean all the changes. But my first reaction was, like literally, if I had written a list, if Sean had reached out to me, which he never would, and said, "Hey, you know, Craig, what are the things that bug you a little bit?" I've like checkbox, like hit everyone. I was just so impressed by it. Ian, I really enjoyed this, man. Thanks for taking the time.
I did too. Thank you for talking to me.
Yeah, and for those of you that sat through this whole thing, like it's the end and you stayed this whole time, I appreciate you too. Take care.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. Subscribe to Tabletop Talk and share it with your friends. Check out our content on YouTube and Twitch. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook and stay updated on everything coming from Third Floor. All the links are in the show notes. Take care, floorheads.
Oh, that was great, Ian. How are we doing on time? We're at 24 minutes. That's good.
Good.
All right. So we kind of covered Moonbase.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to leave that out. I'm not.
That's fine.
Not familiar with Meat Grinder.
Meat Grinder, I did not write.
Oh, why did I put that in the notes?
I published it.
Oh, you published it.
Though.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's weird. So I'm in sort of a weird transitional phase where I was publishing stuff that I had written, but then Meat Grinder was a stretch goal to the drain, and I had a friend write it, and then people were getting confused and saying that I had wrote it.
Okay, we'll hear.
So that's why.
Let's talk about this. This is good stuff. I'll bring us back.
Okay.
This is good.
So I had a family gathering and I subjected some of my extended family to Mothership. None of them had, I think, even played a role-playing game before.
Wow.
But I ran a modified version of the Mothership. It's not officially a starter adventure, but it's one that's often recommended as a starter adventure. The Haunting of Ypsilon 14, which is a pamphlet scenario. Actually, wait, hold that thought. That was completely wrong. That was not the one I based off of. Okay.
You're a lying liar. Who lies, Ian?
Yeah. No, it was so... All of what I just said applies, but it was the first part of Dead Planet.
Yep. It's a great intro.
Yeah, which is called The Screaming on the Alexis.
Yep.
So I took the Alexis, but because I was running it as a one-shot, I kind of wanted a more self-contained scenario.
Yep.
God, I'm sorry. I'm like, you're gonna have to cut this whole part out because I just realized I just started telling the same story wrong twice.
Okay.
Really sorry about that.
Pick up wherever you want, Ian. I'll take care of it.
Yeah. Okay. So,
You're with your family.
gosh, everything that the family isn't even related to this.
Okay.
To how I got started. So forget all of that. I'm really sorry.
I was in the Soviet Union in 14.
Yeah. I that is the first Mothership game that I ran, but it became something else entirely that I eventually ended up publishing with TKG. So it doesn't, but that's irrelevant basically.
Okay.
So okay. So
that was a good 10 minutes, so I threw a break in there. I hope you don't mind.
that's fine.
How you feeling? All right?
Good.
Good.
I think.
Yeah, it was a good conversation, man. So I think I'm going to go a little different direction if it's okay with you. I think what I'm going to do is instead of talking about Mothership first, I want to talk about your transition from consumer to producer a little bit.
Sure.
So I'm going to kind of flip that around a little bit. Then we'll talk Mothership, right? Because that makes sense there.
Mm-hmm.
All right, cool. I'll bring us back. Hey, are you still here? Look, the podcast is over. And you sat through all of the breaks and bloopers? Well, I mean, if you're here, you might as well run over to patreon.com and become a supporter. Don't forget to rate and review this podcast too while you're at it, on whatever platform you're listening to. I do appreciate you sticking around. Take care.